All right, as promised in yesterday's content, yes, I am recording this right after yesterday's content. Yesterday proved to be a very busy day, so I wanted to bank the content. But I wanted to talk about journalistic ethics today and why they're important. And this ties into Monday's video about the dreaded anniversary of the Goobergate, the Gatorgate, Gamergate, the Voldemort word of or Beetlejuice, depending on how you look at it. More Beetlejuice than Voldemort, really. But the idea of journalistic ethics, and it's a very important topic to me, and we didn't really get to have a really good discussion about ethics in journalism and the unique challenges with games journalism, because everything went to shit with Gamergate, and the message got confused and everything went crazy, and the rest is history. But journalistic ethics, especially in gaming, is very important. And the reason I say especially in gaming is because unlike, say, political reporting, where there is a White House press pool and an expectation of a right to access, when anything's taxpayer funded, there's an expectation that because it's taxpayer funded, the taxpayer has a right to know what's going on. And so media gets the presumption is you get access unless you do something not so good. Gaming is the exact opposite. There's a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of industrial espionage. People are constantly trying to find out what other studios are doing, blowing a rollout or losing track of a message, losing control of a message on a game rollout can severely hurt a game launch, because it's all about expectations and hype. And this is something my video game bootcamp series from the Indiegogo campaign is going to touch on in one of the videos, is the sort of precarious relationship between publishers and game journalists. It just seems like everybody's sort of afraid of each other. But that's why ethical conduct... Loki, please don't dig. Thank you, Loki. But that's why ethical conduct is so critically important, because there are a lot of unique things about the people who consume enthusiast gaming content as well. And one of them is, because we are gamers, we are also dyed-in-the-wool rule lawyers a lot of the time. We tend to be lawful alignments a lot of the time, and fairness is extremely important. I say all the time, I'm less interested in what you think than why you think what you think. That seems to be a more common thing among gamers than the general public. I find a lot of people in the general public are just like, disagree, and they don't really provide, that's just my opinion, is what they get. I'm just expressing my opinion. They can't really back it up. It's really an emotional response. Whereas a gamer can speak for 45 minutes about why they have a certain opinion. Trust me, some of my earlier videos went on that long on a single topic. And we're introverts, so when we do start talking, it's just like, I can't stop because all the words are built up and, oh God, this is terrifying, ramble, ramble, ramble. But because we're rule lawyers, and because we believe in fairness, but also we are highly systemized thinkers, and there have been shenanigans in the past because relationships are everything, and too many people just didn't declare, I won't even say conflicts. They didn't declare relationships, and if they declared them in the first place, there would have been no conflict. But because they didn't declare it, then it's a problem. Really simple, avoidable stuff. There are certain instances where you should conflict yourself out, like recuse yourself. I'm a big believer in recusal when you don't believe you can be objective. There are some games I have refused to review because I didn't think I could be objective on them. I didn't think I could give them a fair shake. It's like, I'm not going to like this game. Why would I review this game? It's not fair to the game. Find someone who has a hope in hell of liking it You're supposed to be matching games to the people who might want to play them. The most important thing for me I have found during my career about the importance of ethics in journalism in any way. I've worked in talk radio, I've worked in youth programming, music news, um, just sort of general newsroom stuff. The most important reason that, other than just the obvious ethics are good, being unethical is bad, the most practical reason is that at some point you will make a mistake. You will not catch a lie. You will get duped. You will mess up a fact. You will get confused about something. You will get rushed and forget to triple check something. Although triple sourcing has gone the way of the dodo, it drives me crazy. If you can get a single source on the record nowadays, la-di-da, good for you. So many stories are strictly on anonymous info now. Partially it's the post-Watergate era, but partially it's also things move so fast now that it's great when you can get one of these well-researched bits of journalism that have multiple sources that all corroborate each other. That's awesome. It does still happen. But a lot of games journalism is rumor and speculation. And somebody said this when they were drunk at a party. And then the game company won't confirm it. So you either have to run with the rumor or let them kill your story, which is challenging. But the most important thing in this climate is that your audience, your readership, or your viewership, basically you guys, can trust that it was an honest mistake. And when you're wrong, and you say so, you make it right, you correct the record, which is why I implemented the Feedback Friday thing, because if there's, usually it's a vagary, usually it's something I wasn't as clear on as I could have been, and so I can correct that. Sometimes it's a misunderstanding, sometimes emotions are running high, but one way or another, we have a form of communication between you guys and me that we can do sort of an ongoing checks and balances accountability exercise so that you guys can trust all the time that I am providing you the best facts and the best evidence that I can give you under less than ideal circumstances. And because games writers, I hesitate to call myself a journalist nowadays, because journalism for me is when I was like shoving my foot in the door at E3 booths to get into the demo when they pretended to lose my appointment that they never booked in the first place. You can't do that anymore. You get thrown out. But that to me was journalism, like straight up Lois Lane stuff. I don't consider what I do now the same thing. But when I do report on stories, when I do tell you my opinions on things, it is very important that you trust that I am giving it to you straight, especially when you disagree with me. And that's what you lose if you play fast and loose. And if you actually look at journalist codes of ethics, and the Society for Professional Journalists is the most readily available one, but there are others. AP style, stuff like that. That's writing style, but that's a form of style, as a form of ethics in its own way. I know people are like, what do you mean? What do you mean style is ethics? Well, it's, you use a style guide for a reason, and it's about tone in your articles. The crossover is, for instance, standard pronouns, for instance, for non-binary people. If there's no newsroom policy about what to call a person who doesn't identify as he or she, you get things that are all over the map, and readers, especially older readers, don't understand what's a Z, what's a Zir. They don't know. And then you end up explaining it, and then you get into dead naming and a whole bunch of other things you're not supposed to do. Many newsrooms have just said we're using they across the board. If you are non-binary, we refer to you as they. That is our style, to avoid bespoke pronouns. Other websites allow a limited number of bespoke pronouns. Others, because they're a liberal, younger, very targeted mindset, use any pronoun you want. But style guides are very important in that way because it protects the reporter from accusations of things like transphobia, racism, because if there's a specific word you're supposed to use, you don't get into an argument of intent. Why did you use that word? Well, because my style guide says that's the word we're supposed to use. You don't like it, take it up with my editor. That's how it works. It protects the people on a site if you have a reporter's code of conduct and you have a style guide that is the bullet points, the Coles notes, available to the public. And this is not talking obviously about things like Oxford commas and things like that. I stand by the Oxford comma. But, this is actually, how do you refer to different types of people? In the US, for instance, African American is still very common. Up here, you don't see African Canadian very much because a lot of the black people here are West Indian, and so it's just black. Because, then there are brown people, and they're also from the same place, but they're different genetically, so we just say black and brown. We don't say African Canadian, because I remember a kid in school. It was like, I ain't never been to Africa. Don't call me African Canadian. And then another kid who actually was from South Africa and was white was like, I am. And everybody laughed. Like that wasn't considered white privilege or anything like that back then. It was a funny point because the guy who was saying, I never been to Africa, was actually from Southside Chicago originally. And this Afrikaner kid, this Dutch extract kid, was actually from South Africa. It was a very funny moment because we did have kids who were from places like Kenya, Somalia, things like that. And then we had the Caribbean, the Afro-Caribbean people, and very different experience. There isn't a single black experience. And it's a major point of ethics is if you are going to write about a subject, you better know that stuff, or you better write from a point of view where it's very clear you don't know that stuff, that you are new to this culture, and be very, very careful about your assumptions and generalizations. And all these things not only make you better because they make you a more thoughtful writer, but they do protect you when you do screw up. And oh my God, we all do it. There are so many on-the-fly judgment calls, especially in news radio. Good God. Talked about that before. I'll spare you this time. But there are certain judgment calls that can seem so simple in the rearview mirror, like, why did I do that? That was dumb. But in the moment, when you're crunched for time, not so easy, not so simple. The pressure's on and things are far less clear in the moment than they are in retrospect. News is the first sentence of history. And, that means that there's a lot of ways to go. It hasn't even been spell checked yet. It's a draft, and the story evolves, and we find out more and more and more. And when things are breaking, things are often reported that are inaccurate at first. Speculation is often reported because, if something like there's an active shooter, you're trying to tell people to avoid the area, or, you're trying to give people the best news you can as fast as you can while still getting it right. There's an old adage in entertainment: fast, cheap, good, pick two. You can't get three. And so many newsrooms are operating on such a shoestring budget now that cheap is locked in. So you have a choice between fast or good. And that's why I usually won't be the first person you see reporting on a story, because I want to get my facts right. And that knocks my traffic down quite a bit, but I stand by that. And that's why, oh crap, I forgot the Patreon. Help support this Patreon channel, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. What Patreon does is, because it's monthly support, instead of worrying about clicks, then I can actually focus on good instead of fast and not worry about that traffic so much, because you guys have told me you'd rather it be accurate than fast. And I listened to that. And so for those of you who started watching this channel in 2015-ish, because you thought I was at least playing fair, even though you didn't agree with anything I was saying, that's how you build a relationship. And I do my best to respect that and treat it as special and precious, because it is. You guys don't have to watch this channel. You can watch plenty of other things. You can read things. There's plenty of sources of news and opinion out there. And audiences, journalists and personalities should never take for granted their audience, because there's always somewhere else to go. And the minute you start doing that, the minute you start seeing your viewership or your readership as entitled or spoiled or, whatever those things that it would flung at gamers over the years, why should anybody consume your content if you think that about the people who are in one way or another paying your salary through their clicks or their direct support? You lose your audience the minute you do that. You're at that point, you're speaking to other people in the press the same way I talked about the people freaking out in the mainstream press right now because of the death threats. You are speaking to other people in your industry in some warped view of solidarity. You're not advocating for the consumer. You're not just getting the facts. You're not helping people choose for themselves what they will like and not like, and providing them the best gaming experience you possibly can. And that, at the end of the day, is what game journalism ethics are all about, in service of providing the viewer or the reader or whatever the information they need to make an informed choice on their purchases. Yes, there's social issues, and yes, there's all that interesting stuff, but at the end of the day, that's what it's about, whether it's about game theory or game development theory, or even these social issues, because some people like exploring social issues in games, some people don't. And, people should be able to avoid content that bothers them or that makes them feel attacked before they spend $60 to $80 on a game, sometimes $40. But, you have to be in the right place for some games. Horror games, I have to be in the right place for. It was amazing. I used to love horror games, and then I had my knee injury and I had surgery. I could not play a horror game while I was really laid up, because that whole thing of running and the fact I knew I couldn't run completely freaked me out, made me feel helpless in a visceral way that I absolutely cannot explain. It took me years to get back to it. I think it was actually The Evil Within was the first post-surgery horror game I played that didn't freaking terrify me in a way that they haven't. Like, not good terrify, bad terrify. And so that's one of those things. It's like, hey, this is what it made me feel. Keep that in mind. Sometimes you can just be too close to something, and you need to feel empowered. You need a game like Doom where I'm super awesome and boom, 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 boom. It's kind of an easy game. Blast, 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 blast. I am a murder machine of power. Sometimes that's healthy. Sometimes that gives you a boost you're not getting in the real world, because the real world's stepping on your neck. Other times you want a challenge. You want your mind blown. And a good piece of coverage lets a person know that in one way or another. So that's the important thing. That's what I want to talk about. And I've wanted to talk about it for years, and it's really too bad that that we can't in an open forum, because somebody shit in the pool, and so we all had to clear it. I am trying to think about how to rectify that. Rectal. Bum. I'm not wearing pants, by the way. Theater of the mind. But let me know, do you guys feel the same way? Do you think there's still room for a discussion about ethics in games journalism? And if so, how do you think we can do that? You know I love your comments. You know I love you. Leave a comment. Thanks for watching.